Now, a slight change in tone, if I may. I still want to hear from you. I think the Lee Anderson question, you know, do you want more Lee Andersons in Parliament or less, whether they come from the left or the right? 0344 499 1000. But the strikes, do you know, I've kind of, I don't know if we just heard so much about it, but I want to know from you if they're actually having any impact on you. Because on the face of it, if you look at it, we've had concerted days of action when people, different organisations have all come out together for maximum impact, no doubt. And we've had different action from different unions on different days. And whilst polls point to mixed levels of support, some huge support for ambulance workers, NHS, and far less for driving instructors and things like this, I'm just saying any comparison, for example, with the 1970s, I think is erroneous and wrong. And I'm really saying, are these strikes working? What do you think? Are they having an impact on your lives? Will they win their arguments? Or are they just going to carry on and become part of our background daily lives? Hopefully not. Just to join me to take a closer look at this is someone who knows an awful lot about the world of trade unionism and academic, Dr. Deepa Driver. Hello, Deepa. Dr. Deepa Driver. Hello.
You can call me Deepa. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you. So I suppose rather than necessarily kick off by getting into the ins and outs of each of the strikes, the thesis I'm putting forward is that the point about a strike is to both remind the employers, be they government or whoever they are, how vital the workers are to the services provided, and secondly, to cause maximum impact and disruption so that the public are aware of their cause and it piles on the pressure. I just begin to feel we're kind of getting a bit war-weary now, and the strikes are going on and people's lives are working around the strikes. I mean, am I wishful thinking, or what would you say to that? I think the screen's frozen, so that's if you're watching, you might have seen that, and I suspect well, we'll be back in any second. But look, just a quick explanation of what I mean. Working from home, which is not something I'm a huge fan of, but lots of people do it. We've become used to it. Employers have come used to it. So therefore, how can the impact of a train strike be as effective? Deepa, welcome back. I hope you heard my question.
I think I did, but please do correct me if I missed something. So firstly, you're right. It is about causing disruption. It's about taking back power in some ways, because what are all these strikes about? They're about the fact that wealth is being redistributed from the poorest in society to the wealthiest in society. That's why right now we have British Gas declaring a £3 billion profit while installing force-fitting prepayment meters to the most vulnerable. It's also why the government is able to write off £15 billion in PPE, which was, a completely corrupt process, and then say, oh, we don't have enough money to pay nurses. So, yes, part of what strikes are about is regaining that power for workers, because it is the workers whom we clapped for during the NHS struggle against COVID, whom we realise are the frontline workers doing the work that keeps our economies going. But it's also about building solidarity amongst various trade unions and allowing people to talk to each other. So I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yes, absolutely. I was just giving you a free run at it because I don't just want to interrupt at every point. But since we're at that point, I suppose, therefore, that I would say to you, I think the train strikes, which are one of those that don't, for example, enjoy huge public support. They've got the latest polls I've got here, they've got about 35% support. 21% don't have an opinion, believe it or not, and 39% against them. But people can work round a train strike. So the idea of causing disruption, which is enabling this retaking of power, if you like, as you define it, it's just not working anymore, is it? Because we don't go into the office. We just stay at home or something.
I don't think that's quite quite right, Nick. Firstly, huge solidarity to the RMT and other rail workers striking, and ASLEF and other rail workers taking action. What they're doing is really important, because what we're saying is working people are no longer willing to just get crumbs off the table as and when, because not only have real wages really shrunk, what's also really increased in society is inequality. And you can see a small number of very wealthy people doing incredibly well. But for the vast majority of people, life has become very, very difficult. A quarter of the population, Resolution Foundation data suggests, are not able to have a balanced meal in a day. In the fifth richest country in the world.
All right. I think can I come back to your salaries? Please. Can I come back to your salaries point? Because you're talking as if everyone is on very low income, but we know train drivers aren't. We know that there's average salaries there of 50,000. I'll have someone on the production team just check that for me. But I think the average salary, for example, of train drivers is £50,000. Some are 60,000. People are complaining that MPs who are on 85,000 are getting a rise of 2.9%. Why would the public actually necessarily think that a train driver who's on 60,000 is actually poor and can't put meals on the table?
So the vast majority of rail workers aren't on the same salary as a train driver. Train driving is a very specialist job, and you and I want to be driven by somebody who gets us safely to the next destination.
And they're well paid for it.
They have to be paid a fair wage, right? And a wage that keeps pace with inflation. What's also important to recognize is the bulk of the people are striking about many different things. It's essentially about pay, but also about conditions, about the fact that we're going to have services which are not fit for purpose, which are not.
But I think people understand that.
Safety standards.
No, I think you make the point well, and I think people understand that. I suppose my central question today, though, is the strikes aren't winning. They're losing. Nothing's happened. The government haven't changed their mind. The civil servants are not having a big impact when they go out. Lots of people say they've not noticed. University staff, I think they're on their fourth attempt to strike. Well, students are probably noticing, but even they're adapting and they're working from home. The age has changed from the 70s when unions could bring the country to a halt. I was young enough to remember what that was like. But it's a different age. Aren't they going to have to change tactics if they want to actually have the impact that you would like them to have?
So I'd like to answer your question. Firstly, strikes do work. And that's why, for example, the Coventry bin strikers got the kind of pay rise they did. That's why so many other workers across the country are getting real terms victories. But as somebody, let me talk specifically about the university sector. As somebody who took part in the strikes that stopped our defined benefit pension from being taken away in 2017-18, I can tell you from personal experience that strikes work. But it's very important that people like you give us the support that we need, and people in the public, and we are the public really, because we are the working class, that we support each other to make sure that these strikes win, because the government has no excuses now. Very clearly, the government is able to spend money on all kinds of things.
Well, yes, but would you... Let me ask you this. We've been asking... It's a really good point. I mean, I would argue they don't have the money. They have to borrow the money or get it from us as the taxpayers. But let's park that, because that's not really something worth you and I digging into. But you say they have the money, and yet they will produce money to go to support Ukraine, 2.3 billion. They will produce money to help people in devastated countries like Turkey and Syria at the moment. Are you saying those are choices they shouldn't make and therefore support the public sector workers who are on strike, the train drivers and so forth? Or are you saying do both? Because that's a big ask.
Okay, firstly, from a very personal point of view, I can say I'm anti-war. So what we should be supporting is negotiations, not more weapons. And that's a personal perspective.
Okay, we won't go into that. That's a whole new interview.
Exactly. So let's talk about helping humanitarian crises abroad. of course, we have a responsibility in the global community to help people in distress. And it is not a trade-off between poor people in Syria.
But it is. They are the choices, isn't it?
Could I finish my point?
Sure.
It is not, well, actually, it's not a trade-off between them and us. It's a choice in this society whether we want to pay 15 billion for PPE that is not used, whether we want to pay for Tory corruption that is causing the destruction.
Yeah, but you see, this is rhetoric now. Honestly, Deepa, this is kind of rhetoric, and I'm trying to say, whatever your arguments on that, whatever your arguments on that, and by the way, in France they burnt and wasted PPE just as badly as we did in this country. They've done it elsewhere. The strikes are not having that impact, are they? Because you're still here months later trying to win the argument. The strikes aren't working.
Okay, well, let me respond to that specific point.
Go on then.
Firstly, strikes are working because employers, I'm a national negotiator, and I know that other national negotiators know that employers are moving. You can see it from the kinds of offers that were never considered that are being put forward. I also think, very importantly, that the way in which we talk about strikes has a very great impact on whether they are successful or not. So what you should be doing and what your viewers should be doing, because they are affected by this, is to put pressure on the government and on employers to agree to a reasonable settlement that allows to have a real-term pay.
Dr. Deepa Driver, for no other reasons, just by the way, I will ask the questions. I don't think I'm necessarily going to be on the picket lines with you, but I'll certainly ask the questions that you're asking. Dr. Deepa Driver, trade unionist and academic, thanks for joining us. I don't think the strikes are working because I don't think the outcomes are there. Are they affecting you?